Hi everyone, I'm Pat Prokop, retired meteorologist, and this is a special YouTube video on Hurricane Idalia because Idalia now is becoming a major hurricane and will be affecting southeastern Georgia and southern South Carolina as a hurricane. So let's go into the maps right now and start things off. There it is right there. The new plot shows the storm in the northeastern east central portion of the Gulf of Mexico moving northward, and then is expected to curve across the upper portions of southeastern Georgia into eastern South Carolina, remaining as a hurricane. Let me show you this right here to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. As the storm moves up, it now looks like it's going to make a Category 4 status hurricane, making landfall in and around the Big Bend area of Florida with horrendous flooding tides out in that area. And with the winds at 130 miles an hour, the storm is also going to be moving at about 15 to 20 miles per hour forward speed, and that will keep it strong as it goes into south central portions of Georgia around the Valdosta area and just west of Waycross. It will still be a possibility, a Category 2 hurricane at that phase. And then by sunset on later today, Wednesday, the winds are still expected to be at hurricane force or above hurricane force of 74 miles per hour, still around 80 mile per hour winds with higher gusts associated with this as well. And then breaking down to tropical storm strength as it moves just offshore north of the Charleston, South Carolina area with 60 mile per hour winds. But this is going to be a very dangerous situation now with widespread tree damage and power outages across the southeast, including southeastern Georgia and the southern portions of South Carolina in our area. So let's look at what else we got here. I want to show you on this map. Tornadoes in our area too. And there's the slight risk for tornadoes in our area. With that storm coming in, on the eastern side of the storm, you'll see the better chances for severe weather tornado situations developing. And these spin-up tornadoes will be short-lived, but they'll be within the squalls that come up with the storm itself. And these could be 100-mile-an-hour winds in some of these spin-up tornadoes. So there'll be a chance for tornadoes along with the high winds in our area. Now, let's take a look at the conditions across the area with the radar. And there's the current radar. This is the midnight view now. And already a tornado watch, which is no surprise, is in effect for the western portions of the coast of Florida into central and north central portions of Florida until 6 o'clock in the morning. Most likely, this will be extended eastward and northward into southeastern Georgia and southern South Carolina throughout the day on Wednesday. We're seeing a very well-defined hurricane now in the west central Gulf of Mexico, east central Gulf of Mexico, west of Tampa, Florida right now. I want to go to the radar right here that I'm looking at. Bringing it over a little bit. And this is the reflectivity, and there's the eye of the storm right now. Very well-defined eye of the storm. Very heavy squalls moving along the western shores of the peninsula of Florida. Very strong convection developing to the north of that, moving in toward the Big Bend area of Florida. Now, I'm going to put this into motion briefly, because I'm going to show you the Doppler radar on this. But there you can see the storm is now, you can actually see it moving to the north. It's picking up forward speed, and that's part of the danger aspect of this storm, because the forward speed is going to allow this thing to move deep into Georgia before it starts winding down. So let's put this into the Doppler mode, and I want to show you something over here. Right over here, there's the eye itself right there. Now, these winds around the eye, according to this Doppler view here, are, oh my gosh, what are they measuring? 75, 78, almost 80 knots. That's about 92, 93 miles per hour. And then on the back side of the eye, the other side of the eye, same speed, about 80 knots, 81 and a half knots right now. There's a new update right there. Let's take a look. And looking at that speed again, I'm looking at the speeds, and I'm seeing there's an 83 and a half knots. That's about 95 miles per hour, indicated by the radar alone. And the system continues to move to the north and will continue to move over this extremely warm water, very high octane fuel supply for this hurricane, and that's going to allow it to possibly get up to 130 miles per hour, which is a low-end Category 4 hurricane. And to my understanding, a hurricane of that strength has never moved into this area of the Big Bend region of Florida. Now, I remember back in the 1980s, 1986, I think it was, deep in November, we had a hurricane moving into this position right here. It was a Category 2 hurricane, and it moved in across the this area of Florida and then curved off to the east-northeast, went right across Savannah. We had 65-mile-per-hour winds with that. And this one's going to be even bigger. So 80-mile-an-hour winds most likely is a given that we're going to see in the Savannah area. Now let's take a look at the models. And when I say Savannah, I'm also talking about Statesboro and Jessup and Sylvania, Baxley. Now, Baxley, you might end up with 100-mile-per-hour wind gust in your area throughout the day, later today, particularly in the morning and early afternoon hours. And Waycross and St. Simons and Brunswick, perhaps 100-mile-per-hour winds. We can't rule that out. In the upper portions of southeastern Georgia, Hinesville, Statesboro, and Springfield, over into Guyton, across the river into Hardyville, we could see potential 80-mile-per-hour winds. Now, let's put this into motion. This is the regional GEM model. And there it is. The storm right now is over here in the northeast portion of the Gulf of Mexico, and it's expected to make landfall somewhere around sunrise in the morning or shortly thereafter sunrise, and then move just about right over the Valdosta area, and then moves off toward the northeast, and then curves more to the northeast after that. But the problem here is the wind and the rain that's going to be associated with it. And remember, everything on the east side of this storm here will be in the threat for tornado activity, as well as all the other dangers of the high sustained winds and the extremely heavy rains that'll be associated with that. Speaking of that, let's take a look. And the computer models here, this is the same model, the RGEM, and it's showing a band of very heavy rains of 4 to 6 inches to 8 inches, and some locations might even see 12 inches of rain. Looking at the other mesoscale models, the NAM, North American model, showing basically the same thing, a little bit further westward edge on the rains, not the winds. Don't worry, don't say, well, it's moving westwards, it's going to be okay. It's not going to be okay. In the eastern counties, even though the models aren't showing as much rain, there will be much rain, and there will also be extremely high amount of dangerous, damaging winds across all of the eastern Georgia and the southern portions of South Carolina. One other model, let's look at the high-res FV3, and basically the same thing. So let's look at another model here, the models that are generated from the National Digital Forecast data. And it shows very heavy rains across the interior portions of southeastern, all of southeast and south central Georgia, up into the central Savannah River area, down to the mouth of the Savannah River. Not quite as much, again, in the coastal areas, but don't worry. I'm not shouldn't say that. Don't worry, but be afraid, because the wind is going to be extremely strong, and that's going to also produce very high saltwater flooding across the coastal counties. Now, the inland counties, you're going to see a lot of heavy rains, very heavy rains, and this rain total here is in 24 to 36 hours, a very heavy amount of rain in a very short period of time. So flash flooding, there's going to be widespread flash flooding on top of the trees that are going to be coming down. So, we're going to have power outages. Just how widespread those power outages will be and for how long, that's a good question. But this is going to be a very dangerous storm. I've been weather forecasting here in the Savannah area for 42 years now, and this one, it really looks bad. I mean, I've seen some bad hurricanes moving across our area, but this one, I think, is going to take the cake so far as producing widespread damage across central and eastern Georgia and most of South Carolina, and not to mention what's going to happen into the Florida area and around the Big Bend area, and just to the north of Tampa and the Gainesville area, Tallahassee. That's going to be just devastating out in that region there. All right, let's move along and go to the next thing I want to show you, and that's going to be the tide. The tide levels on Tuesday evening maxed out a little bit above normal, maxed out about 9.4 feet, which is below flood area, the roads and the marshes and lagoons begin to overflow at about 9.6 to 9.7, 9.8. But let's take a look at the a map once again. Go back over to here. This is the problem right over here. Looking at this area, the hurricane itself at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon will still be pumping in some very strong southerly to southeasterly winds across the Atlantic Ocean into the coast of Georgia and directly into the coast of southern South Carolina. That's going to really elevate the tides. Now, do I have this graphic here? Let's see. This is the graphic I'm looking for, and the National Hurricane Center has the potential for 2 to 4 foot tide surge on top of the tide. Looking at the new data coming in from the Hurricane Center, there's a potential that this could be 3 to 5 feet above the tide. Now, what does that mean? You take the actual tide data, and then you add this to the tide data. So the tide data for Wednesday morning at right around 8 o'clock at Fort Pulaski is 7.8 feet. Now, remember what I said. Flooding begins at about 9.6, 9.8. We'll be already up to basically 8 feet. Add 2 feet to that, you got 10 feet, and you're already above flood, and that's the low end. 4 feet, that's it's midnight. My brain is getting soft. That's 12-foot tide. That's about what it was with Irma. We had a 12-foot tide, and a lot of flooding occurred with Irma. And it's a possibility that if it goes to 3 to 5 feet on the total, we could see a 13-foot tide. I've never seen a 13-foot tide here in Savannah. Savannah did have an 18.5-foot tide surge in 1893. As a matter of fact, it was almost on this date, August 27th, 1893. The massive hurricane that went up to Savannah into South Carolina generated a tremendous surge and tremendous amount of damage as well in the Savannah area. But keep this in mind, the evening high tide will be at 8:30, and that's going to be up to 8.8 feet. We have the full super moon over the next couple of nights, so that's already driving the tides up higher. Add 9 feet plus 4 feet, that's 13 feet, possibly 14 feet. I don't think it'll be high on the southern counties around Camden, Glenn, and McIntosh County, because by that time the storm will be up over in here, and they'll be getting more westerly winds blowing the tide out. But the upper portions of southeastern Georgia around the, Chatham County, Liberty County, and of course Beaufort County and Colleton counties, will have very strong winds pushing up into this area right here, very strong winds, and it'll be grazing on the upper Georgia coast, but directly piling up on the South Carolina coast. So Hilton Head Island, Beaufort Island, Fripp Island, all these islands in the Beaufort County area, the flooding is going to be pretty rough out there, the saltwater flooding. And then if you get any heavy rains at the time of this high tide, and I think we're going to see those heavy rains, there's no place for that water to go. So we're going to have a lot of freshwater flooding as well. There's going to be a lot of flooding in the streets in the coastal counties, even in the inland counties, and you don't have to worry about the storm surge, but you're going to have that freshwater flooding. And then for several days thereafter as the rivers start collecting all that water. So let's go back here to the end of this video. And I do want to show you one other thing. The forecast, of course, is for today is to be just horrible. Winds perhaps up to 80 miles an hour in the greater Savannah area, perhaps up to 100 miles per hour in our southern counties around the Baxley area and Coffee County, Douglas, Hazelhurst, all those areas. You could possibly see 100-mile-per-hour winds, sustained winds in those areas. And then Jessup, perhaps near 100 miles per hour, moving northward into our portions of southeastern Georgia, Savannah area, 80 miles per hour. So with that, by Thursday, it'll start clearing off, maybe some rain showers in the morning hours, but then clearing off. And then as we go into the Labor Day weekend, the weather's looking very nice right now. So that's one encouraging thing. We're going to need that to help clean up after this horrible storm is going to be passing across the area. Again, this is now midnight, a little bit after midnight, and I wanted to get this out before the next advisory comes in, because this is very dangerous new situation with this storm. Hurricane conditions across just about all of the southeast Georgia counties and into the southern South Carolina counties, there's going to be widespread tree and widespread tree damage and a lot of power outages, widespread power outages at that. So, stay tuned. The big one is stay safe. Try to stay inside. You don't want to be outside with flying debris going through the air. That's very dangerous as well. And you don't want to be driving through flooded roads. Again, they're very dangerous. So keep that in mind. So stay safe. Stay safe.